Hey everyone! Today we're diving into the fascinating life of Prophet Muhammad, the founder of Islam and the last in a long line of prophets recognized by Muslims. Born Muhammad ibn Abdullah in 570 CE in Mecca, he's considered the seal of the prophets, which means he was the final messenger in a line that includes figures like Adam, Moses, Abraham, and Jesus. Muhammad started out as just an ordinary guy from Mecca, but according to Islamic tradition, his life took a dramatic turn when he began receiving divine revelations from God around 610 CE. These revelations were eventually compiled into the Quran, the holy book of Islam. In the beginning, Muhammad's message wasn't exactly welcomed with open arms in Mecca. He faced a lot of resistance and only managed to convert a small group of followers. But things started to change when he moved to the city of Yathrib, later known as Medina. There, he not only grew his following but also began expanding his influence through both diplomacy and conflict. By the time of his death in 632 CE, Muhammad had united most of the Arabian Peninsula under the banner of Islam. His successors, the caliphs, continued to expand this new empire, which would grow to include the Umayyad, Abbasid, and Ottoman dynasties. What started as a small group of believers eventually turned into one of the world's major religions, spreading far beyond Arabia through conquest, trade, and missionary work. Now let's rewind a bit to his early life. Muhammad was born into the Hashim clan of the respected Quraysh tribe. His father, Abdullah, died before he was born, and his mother, Amina, passed away when he was just 6 years old. After that, his grandfather Abd al-Muttalib took care of him, but he also died a couple of years later. So, Muhammad's uncle, Abu Talib, stepped in and raised him with fatherly love and care. Growing up, Muhammad gained a reputation for being incredibly honest and trustworthy. People even nicknamed him As-Sadiq, the truthful, and Al-Amin, the trustworthy. Despite the widespread idol worship in Mecca, Muhammad's character stood out, and many entrusted him with their valuables. At 25, Muhammad's life took another significant turn. A wealthy widow named Khadijah was so impressed by his integrity that she proposed marriage to him. They got married in 595 CE, and even though she was 15 years older than him, their bond was incredibly strong. Muhammad never married another woman while Khadijah was alive, which was quite unusual for that time. Muhammad and Khadijah had a loving and supportive relationship. He often spoke fondly of her, saying she believed in him when no one else did, and supported him with her wealth and companionship. They had 2 sons and 4 daughters, though sadly, both sons died in infancy. As Muhammad reached his late 30s, he began spending more time in solitude, meditating in a cave called Hira near Mecca. It was here, in 610 CE, that he experienced a life-changing event. One night, he saw a light and heard a voice that identified itself as the angel Gabriel, delivering the first revelation from God. Initially, Muhammad was terrified and confused. He ran home, trembling, and it was his wife Khadijah who comforted him and reassured him of his mission. She took him to her cousin Warqa, a Christian scholar, who confirmed that Muhammad had indeed been chosen as a prophet. So, after receiving the first revelation, Muhammad began preaching the oneness of God to his family and close friends. The first person to convert was his wife, Khadijah, and soon after, his close friend Abu Bakr also accepted the message. By 613 CE, Muhammad started preaching openly, and that's when things got really tough. You see, Mecca was a major religious center because of the Kaaba, which housed many idols. The city's economy relied heavily on the pilgrims who came to worship these idols, so when Muhammad declared that these were false gods, it wasn't just a religious challenge, it was an economic threat. The Meccans did everything they could to stop him, from bribery to physical torture, but Muhammad remained steadfast. Around 616 to 619 CE, the rival clans of the Quraysh tribe decided to boycott Muhammad's clan, the Hashim. This meant that Muhammad and his followers, known as the Sahaba, faced severe hardships, living on the outskirts of town and being cut off from the main community. Yet, despite these harsh conditions, they held on to their faith and continued following God's guidance. Scholar Tamara San explains that Muhammad and his small community were driven from their homes, but they persevered with dignity, suffering injustice without retaliation. In 619 CE, Muhammad faced another major setback when he turned to the city of Taif for support. Initially, he was welcomed, but soon the people rejected his message. As he left the city, a mob threw rocks at him, and he barely escaped with his life. According to legend, the angel Gabriel appeared and offered to destroy the city, but Muhammad refused, believing that the people would eventually come to believe in his message. That same year, Muhammad's uncle Abu Talib and his beloved wife Khadijah both passed away. This period is known as the Year of Sorrow for Muslims. With his uncle's death, Muhammad lost his primary protector within his clan. Abu Talib's position was taken by another uncle, Abu Lahab, who despised Muhammad, leaving him more vulnerable than ever. Amidst this turmoil, some of Muhammad's followers had already migrated to Abyssinia, now modern-day Ethiopia, in 615 CE to escape persecution. But a real opportunity came in 621 CE, when citizens of Yathrib, later called Medina, invited Muhammad to their city. They were impressed by his message and wanted him to act as their leader. This invitation marked a turning point. Muhammad and his followers began migrating to Yathrib in batches. Muhammad himself narrowly escaped an assassination attempt and along with his close friend Abu Bakr, undertook a perilous journey to Medina in 622 CE. This migration, known as the Hijra, is so significant that the Islamic lunar calendar marks it as the beginning of year 0. Means after Hijra. In Medina, Muhammad transitioned from being just a preacher to a leader. He turned Medina into a strong kingdom, establishing standards of justice and unity that were unprecedented in Arabia. Muhammad revised the laws, unified the city, and used both persuasion and, when necessary, force to maintain order. Scholar Robin Doak notes that during his 10 years in Medina, Muhammad evolved from a spiritual leader to a powerful political figure. Muhammad also established a new place of worship, Al-Masjid an-Nabwi, or the Mosque of the Prophet. With political power and a loyal army, he was now in a position to spread his message more effectively than ever before. And now, let's talk about some of the significant battles that shaped the early Muslim community, starting with the Battle of Badr. After establishing themselves in Medina, the Muslims decided it was time to strike back at their former oppressors in Mecca. They started raiding Meccan trade caravans, which hit the Meccan economy hard. In response, the Meccans united their forces against the Muslims, leading to the Battle of Badr in 624 CE. Even though the Muslims were heavily outnumbered, with just 313 fighters against 1,000 Meccans, they managed to secure a stunning victory. Many Muslims saw this as a divine favor, but the Meccans were not about to let this defeat go unanswered. In 625 CE, under the leadership of Abu Sufyan, they gathered another large army and marched towards Medina. Instead of laying siege to the city, they set up camp near the mountain of Uhud, hoping to lure the Muslims into open battle. Their plan worked. The Muslims, confident after their previous victory, marched out to face them. Initially, things went well for the Muslims. They had the upper hand, and the Meccans began to flee, leaving behind their camps and supplies. However, in a critical moment, the Muslim rearguard, disobeying Muhammad's orders, abandoned their posts to collect the spoils of war. This gave the Meccan cavalry a chance to counterattack. They struck hard, catching the Muslims off guard and inflicting severe casualties. Even Muhammad was injured. The Muslims had to retreat, and the Meccans returned to their city, claiming victory. 2 years later, in 627 CE, the Muslims faced an even greater challenge, the Battle of the Trench. This time, a large confederacy of tribes, including the Meccans and several Jewish tribes, marched towards Medina with the intent of laying siege to the city. To defend themselves, the Muslims dug a trench around Medina, a tactic unfamiliar to the Arabs. This trench proved to be a huge advantage, rendering the Confederate cavalry useless in stalling their attack. The siege dragged on for about 30 days. Both the attackers and defenders were growing weary. The Confederates then secretly allied with the Jewish tribe of Banu Qurayza, hoping to attack the Muslims from two fronts. However, Muhammad received word of this plan and sent men to guard the new front. A simultaneous attack would have been disastrous for the Muslims, but they had one last trick up their sleeve. According to Islamic sources, a respected leader from the Confederacy, Nu'aym ibn Masud, who was secretly a Muslim, sowed discord between the Confederate leaders and Banu Qurayza. This lack of unity, combined with strong defenses and worsening weather, forced the Confederates to retreat. The Muslims had won with minimal casualties. After the battle, the tribe of Banu Qurayza was charged with betrayal for violating the peace agreement. The punishment was severe. All the men were killed, and the women and children were taken captive, with their property seized. This event, known as the Massacre of Banu Qurayza, remains a topic of intense debate. Some argue that the harsh punishment was a necessary response to treachery, while others view it as excessively brutal. What's clear is that had the Confederate plot succeeded, the fate of the Muslims would have been just as grim. And now let's dive into the conquest of Mecca. By 628 CE, the Muslims had grown in power and influence. When they wished to perform the pilgrimage to the Kaaba, the Meccans, fearing their increasing strength, denied them entry. However, instead of escalating to conflict, both sides agreed to the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. This treaty allowed the Muslims to perform the pilgrimage the following year and ensured safety for both the Meccans and the Muslims. With peace temporarily secured with the Meccans, the Muslims turned their attention to the Jewish stronghold of Khaybar in 628 CE. The inhabitants of Khaybar had sided with the Meccans in the past, so the Muslims saw them as a threat. After a successful campaign, Khaybar was captured, but the locals were allowed to stay under Muslim control. This approach of allowing non-Muslims to live under Muslim rule continued even after Muhammad's death. These non-Muslims, called dhimmi or protected people, had to pay a special tax called jizya, while Muslims paid zakat. Despite this, they enjoyed religious independence. Some converted to Islam, either to improve their social status or out of genuine belief, while others remained non-Muslim. However, the peace with Mecca didn't last long. In 630 CE, the Meccans violated the Treaty of Hudaybiyah by supporting the Banu Bekr tribe against the Banu Huza'a, allies of the Muslims. This breach led Muhammad and his followers to march on Mecca with a powerful army. Instead of fighting, the Meccans opened their doors, and the city surrendered. Muhammad granted amnesty to the inhabitants and declared the Kaaba a holy site for Islam, destroying all idols within it. This event marked a significant turning point in Islamic history. Muhammad performed his first and last full pilgrimage, known as the Farewell Pilgrimage, in 632 CE. During this pilgrimage, he declared the completion of the Quran. Following the conquest of Mecca, Muhammad's influence continued to grow. The Battle of Hunain in 630 CE saw the Muslims defeating another confederacy of Bedouins. Muhammad also sent armies to conquer other regions of Arabia. The city of Taif, which had previously rejected him, submitted to his rule in 631 CE. An attempt to expand into Byzantine territory ended in defeat at the Battle of Mu'tah in 629 CE, but it laid the groundwork for future Muslim conquests. By the time of his death in 632 CE, Muhammad had united most of Arabia under Islam. Despite the fact that many tribes converted for political reasons rather than spiritual ones, Muhammad's leadership was unmatched. His death marked the end of an era, but his legacy was far from over. After a brief illness, Muhammad passed away peacefully in his home, with his youngest wife, Aisha, by his side. Reflecting on Muhammad's life, it's clear he was a man of incredible vision and talent. He endured immense hardship to spread his message, driven by his unwavering belief in its divine origin. Despite the norms of his time, which included polygamy, Muhammad treated his wives with respect and love. His lack of surviving sons, which was considered essential for one's legacy, didn't diminish his influence. Today, Muhammad's name is one of the most popular among Muslims worldwide, and his teachings continue to inspire millions. While non-Muslims may question the Muslim tradition of not depicting Muhammad in images, this practice is rooted in the desire to avoid idolatry. By not having a fixed image of Muhammad, each believer can form a personal connection with him. Muslims express their respect for Muhammad by adding, "Peace be upon him," whenever they mention his name, honoring the sacrifices he made to spread the religion of peace.